Well, joining me now from Washington is William Binney. He spent more than 30 years with the National Security Agency, the NSA, where he served as technical director. He's also been a guest on InfoWars. In New York is Jamila Brown. She is a digital strategist and the communications director at SumOfUs. It's an organization that holds corporations accountable for unethical behavior. Thanks to both of you for joining us on the Newsmakers. William, how much of a blow to freedom of speech is this ban by these tech companies on Alex Jones and InfoWars?
I think basically what that's saying is that the companies are now going to set the standard of what is acceptable in the media and what isn't, and what is hate speech and what isn't. I mean, that's not something that's in their in their domain to really do. I mean, that like opens it up to anybody shutting off anybody.
It's a good point,
I mean,
Jamila.
Alex,
it's a good point, isn't it, Jamila? That why should a tech company have the moral authority to say what's right and what's wrong?
I think that we have to realize that these tech companies have really a lot of say-so in terms of the consequences of the content that they put out. And with journalists, we hold them to a journalistic standard and ethics, and the same should actually extend to these tech companies that are big sources of information.
William, you're nodding there.
Yes, I agree. I mean, there should be some standard, but I don't think the companies individually should be the ones to set it, simply because they're led by people who have prejudices in one way or another politically, in this country anyway. And that's certainly what they're doing. It's like shadow banning people who are not politically saying the things they once said. Now, this is a bad thing to do. This is how you filter the media and how you filter any of the information that people are trying to find on the web, for example, or anywhere, and news everywhere. The same is true with the mainstream media. They're doing the same thing over here in the U.S. So.
Yeah, Jamila, whether you're left or right, your opinions can be censored, it seems now. There was an ad for an organization that wanted to hold an anti-fascist, anti-racism rally in Washington that was removed because it was believed that possibly Russia may have interfered with that organization. The organization said, we're nothing to do with Russia. We're just normal citizens that don't want racism in the United States. Why have you banned our ad? So left and right are both suffering from this kind of censorship.
I do think that's something that is really important to note. So on Facebook in particular, we saw the censorship of Corrine Gaines, who was a mother from Baltimore, who was killed by the police in an interaction. So we do see these things. I think that we do need some more oversight. The FCC is one entity that we can use to implement those standards. The key, though, is we need to make sure that we're looking at hate supremacist, like white supremacist hate speech in the United States and all over the world, and really understanding the implications of that. And that is something that these tech companies for the past 2 years have been promising to crack down upon. This is a step in the right direction, but yes, it has definitely become a slippery slope. And really what we're seeing on our side of the fence is that there's a racial component to this, if we're being quite honest. A lot of activists who are people of color, who are immigrants, who are LGBTQ, are the ones who are facing the brunt of this censorship. And we have to start really taking deeper questions into why these activists are being censored and what responsibility the tech world plays in it.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're both against censorship, it seems, but this issue of hate speech, William, that's extremely important. Is Alex Jones guilty of hate speech, as Facebook says? Because it says that some of his material violates his policies on hate speech and graphic violence. It refers specifically, Facebook says, to his language to describe people who are transgender, Muslims and immigrants, as has been pointed out in the report that preceded this discussion.
Well, over here, of course, we have the First Amendment, and that guarantees the right to free speech, and it says that it actually protects any kind of speech, even if you don't like it. And we should be able to say certain things are not acceptable. Those things that advocate violence, for example, or any kind of civil disturbance that is disruptive and damaging to the society in any way. So, but I just don't know that the companies, in my view, don't have the real understanding of this situation to be able to set the standards for that. And I just think we need some common standards set by, and I think the FCC is a good one to start. They certainly could set those standards and enforce them.
So these tech companies have made this decision about Alex Jones and InfoWars, but his website, of course, still exists. And some people believe the internet is a bit of a wild west. Earlier this week, Alex Jones put a clip on Periscope, which is owned by Twitter. So he's still able to get out there. Let's play the clip and then come back to you.
We're under attack, and you know that. You've pointed out mainstream media is the enemy. But now it's time to act on the enemy. But there's groups, there's grand juries, you call for it. It's time politically and economically and judiciously and legally and criminally to move against these people. It's got to be done now. So people need to have their battle rifles and everything ready at their bedsides, and you got to be ready.
Okay, it was about 2 minutes 24. We condensed it into 3 separate small clips. William, you said incitement to violence is a good reason to censor someone. That seemed to be an incitement to violence. Get your baton rifles out. And then there's the issue where he says he can still address President Trump, who was a guest of his before he became president on InfoWars. And Trump has said, he has told Alex Jones, yeah, I watch your program. There's also the issue of the discord that is being sowed by people like Alex Jones, and whether President Trump might even actively encourage that because he may feel he's able to take advantage of the discord that is sown in American society by people like Alex Jones.
Well, I don't, I think the American public's really sophisticated enough to be able to handle just about anything that anybody says. I mean, down through history, I think we've done that. But, Alex, for example, I can cite another case in Alex's court, a positive one, where I was showing slides of the Fairview program, the tapping points inside the United States. And he was the only one that would show that on TV. The rest of the mainstream media would not. And that's informing the public of what's really happening to you and spying. So you can look at it in different ways. I think in the way he was talking about the guns there, he was basically affirming the Second Amendment. And the reason we have that Second Amendment is not because of foreign governments, but because of our own. That's our founders really feared central government. So I know that's why they have that Second Amendment. So I don't think Alex Jones was advocating going out shooting people. He's just saying, you need to use the Second Amendment and be prepared. If anybody comes at you, you have it. So not go out and actively do anything. I didn't read that way.
Okay, Jamila?
I honestly have to disagree. I think that there's a difference between free speech and free speech in the service of power. And this is specifically speaking to a demographic of white people who feel disenfranchised and disaffected at this moment to go and take arms against those who would strip power, or they feel, away from them. This is actually the type of thing that we've seen that has resulted in an uptick of violence and white supremacist violence across the United States. Most notably, recently, Mia Wilson, a young Muslim Black woman, was killed at the BART station. Her sister was also stabbed in the attack. We've seen this all over the country. And these are the kinds of dog whistles and race baiting that is particularly the kinds of things that these tech platforms and we as a society need to be standing up against.
Okay, let's just end with the responsibility that these tech companies have, which you touched upon just slightly earlier. It was at the end of 2016, Mark Zuckerberg said, editing, that's not for us. Now, it seems with these decisions and this particular one about Alex Jones, that the companies understand that they're very much media companies, that they are also responsible for the content that is published on their platforms. Facebook is working with Congress and a think tank called the Atlantic Council about how to make sure that its platform is not abused. The Atlantic Council is funded by 25 different foreign countries, some of whom can certainly not be said to be defenders of democracy. It's also funded by companies such as Raytheon, the weapons manufacturer. Are you happy with that, William?
No, I'd rather see some public forum set up to be able to adjudicate and set up these standards, and then have those adopted by Congress or whoever would need to ensure that they were enforced by the FCC or other organizations inside this country and maybe other organizations around the world.
Jamila, is it time now to start treating these tech companies like utilities and they should be regulated? Because while they may be private companies, they're not government owned.
Yep.
They're private companies, but they represent such a massive part of the public sphere. They are really the main way that we discuss world issues nowadays.
It's true, and I completely agree with that. I also agree with William's statement of having a public forum and then having Congress to step in and ratify or adjudicate. That would also be the right step in the right direction. The other thing I will say is that in a time of corporate media where we're seeing human rights abuses, a lot of the way activists are getting information out is through social media. So we do have to make sure to protect the platforms and make sure that this kind of information, stories that are often not told on your average TV program, are getting out there. We've seen it from the Egyptian revolution, has really just changed the way in which activists are getting information out there. And we have to protect that while also guarding against this uptick of violence and dog whistles and white supremacy that we're seeing just sweep across not only the United States, but also the Western world.
William and Jamila, thank you for joining us on the Newsmakers.